Millennial. I'm Emily, and of course, next to me is Brian.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I've got my coffee, so I'm doing good. I also like that it's cooler today because I'm not one of those heat loving people.
Yeah, definitely. It's been really hot the past few days.
Yes, and it's hot for everyone, but we live on the third floor of our apartment complex, so yeah, it definitely gets warm up here. So, we found out recently that two of our friends are officially house hunting, which is super exciting. I know they've been talking about it for a while, but it's really cool that they're actually looking at houses now, or at least look at them online. And Brian is their realtor because, as we've mentioned before, he got his real estate license back in March, like literally the week before our state shut down. So that's monumentous in our minds for more than one reason.
Yes, we thought I'd just take some time today to talk about just some basics of house hunting and buying your first home and things to do and things not to do.
Yeah, because I don't know about you guys, but I've never purchased a home. I've looked at homes online just kind of for fun, and I have a little more knowledge than I used to, such as, what a couple things to look for when you're looking at houses online. But if you asked me to give you 10 tips, I couldn't do that. So it's really nice to know someone who has some knowledge on this, especially when we buy our own home.
Yeah, so just just jumping right into it here. So the first thing to do is just use a realtor. A lot of people think they can do it on their own, but it's just something that you need someone who's experienced doing this to help with. Like you wouldn't try to do open heart surgery on yourself, you would get a professional. Same thing with a lawsuit, you wouldn't take someone to court yourself, you get a lawyer. When you're buying a house, just get a realtor. You'll save yourself a lot of money in the long run.
That's definitely a good point.
Another real basic thing that a lot of people forget is talk to your spouse or your partner or whoever you're with. Because it's not just you who's buying the house, it's everyone in your household. Right, so if you have just a real hankering for marble countertops, but your spouse can't stand them, that's going to be an issue. So really talk to your spouse. And one thing I recommend people do is make a list separately from each other, just of your top 3 to 5 must-have things in a house. And once you've done with both your lists, just compare them and see, so what do you want, and what are the areas we're going to have a problem with, and where do we need to compromise at?
I think that's a very good point because, yes, it seems obvious, like talk to your spouse, the person you're going to be sharing your home with. But I think especially when you're house hunting, there's so many things to consider that you just personally could get overwhelmed. And your list could be long and there's just so many things to consider that the fact that maybe, you want to live in this certain neighborhood, but your spouse is like, no way, I don't want to live there, maybe wouldn't occur to you right away because there's so many other things on your list you're trying to consider.
Mm-hmm. And along with that, it does help to kind of temper expectations a little bit,
Mhm.
because we all like to imagine that we're going to get the dream house right out the gate. Realistically speaking, though, that's not going to happen. You're more likely going to get a starter house,
Mhm.
something that is imperfect, but it's yours. That way you can build a little bit of equity, and eventually down the line, you can get the dream house.
Well, and that's a good point because, there's nothing wrong with like making a list of this is sort of what I would like in a house, sort of my dream. And because I've done that myself, but I know for me, all of that is negotiable. Maybe I won't get it till our second home. Who knows? But the one thing that I know is a non-negotiable is the location, in the sense that I don't want our driveway to back up into a main road, like not like a main neighborhood road, but like a very busy road in our town, because I want family to come to our house and I want them to have a place to park. And that is my 100%. I won't negotiate on that. I want a house that's sort of in a quieter area. Everything else, if I can get some of that stuff, cool, that's great. But it's more negotiable and there's more wiggle room with all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely. So I myself would like a house to be relatively near a major freeway because it's just
Mhm.
easier for commuting.
Right.
But at the same time, I also don't want to be right next to a freeway or a major road just because it gets super noisy and there's lots of traffic and it's just not great.
Right. Right. That's a good point.
The next big thing, though, I would recommend doing is just get pre-qualified because a lot of people don't know this if you're first-time buyers that with the speed at which things are moving at this point, you can't just talk to someone and negotiate and be like, oh, I like your house, I want to buy it, give me a month to talk to my bank and then get them to approve the loan and then no. Everything's moving at the pace of measured in hours, not days.
Oh yeah, yeah. You'll see a house on Redfin, and you're like, "That house looks great," and you'll go to show your spouse 2 hours later, and you're like, "Oh, well, it was great, but it's sold now." So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the solution to this is getting pre-qualified. So that's if you have a bank or credit union or somewhere else who you like working with, talk to them and say, I'd like to get pre-qualified for a home loan, and they will walk you through the whole process. But essentially, it's them going over your finances and determining how much of a loan could you realistically get. That way you have an idea of how much you could spend on a house, how much your monthly payments will be, and if you don't have a bank or anyone like that, that's okay. Just talk to your realtor. I guarantee you that they have all kinds of mortgage lenders and banks on hand ready to assist you with that.
do you think that people don't think to do that because they think you have to have all your ducks in a row and houses in mind and whatnot to do that step?
I'd say it's partially that, but also partially just talking to banks and to financial people can be intimidating for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Anything with money, unless you're in finance, a lot of people are just intimidated by the concept of talking to someone who works with money.
Well, and uh, in our experience, I mean, if you have a bank, that will work too, but in our experience, credit unions have been so helpful in other aspects. And I know that once we go to get pre-qualified, our credit union is going to be easy. They're going to be completely friendly, walk us through everything perfectly. So we are definitely advocates for credit unions.
Yeah. But at the same time, you can get a perfectly serviceable loan from a bank if you get one. So if you have a bank that you just like working
Hmm.
with, just go in and talk to them. Because the people in the office are people too. They do
Hmm.
this every day and they just want to get you the best loan that they can.
Absolutely. Well, are there any other tips that first-time homebuyers should consider, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to being ready to move fast, to just get everything going right away, you want to make sure to make note of anything that you like. So if you walk through the house and you like even minor details like the dining room fan or the refrigerator or the dishwasher or washer and dryer, mention it to your realtor because a surprising number of things don't come with the house.
Mhm.
If you don't mention it to them and you assume that that's going to be part of the house, you might be unpleasantly surprised to learn that no, they're taking their dishwasher with them. On the other hand, if you mention it to your realtor, they can include that information in your offer to the homeowners. So it will say, we're going to buy your house plus washer and dryer. It will probably cost you a little more because you're buying someone else's washer and dryer, but you would be able to get these features that you like. And it's not just limited to that either. It's, like I said, the dining room fan, the pavers on the back porch, like any minor detail that you just really like, feel free to put it in the contract because even if it doesn't make sense, it's okay.
Yes, you're basically saying more information is not a bad thing. Give as much as possible and then just see what happens.
Right. If you were to put, for example, I want the roof of the house to be included, even though that's obviously going to be included, it's not going to hurt anything if you put that in there.
That's interesting because I can see where, yeah, mention you like the refrigerator and see if they'll include it, but just making all sorts of positive, I like the this and that type of comments. I didn't think about that. So that's a good point.
Mm-hmm. On things like if there's a fountain in the backyard that you like, mention that they'll put it in there, or a kid's tree house in the backyard. They may decide to take that down for sentimental reasons. So if you don't mention it, you might not get it.
True. I'll have to keep that in mind when we start looking at houses.
So the other big thing that a lot of people don't quite understand is that the current real estate market is a little weird right now
Mm,
because it's very easy to get a loan Interest rates are very low at the moment, which means that more people can borrow money to buy homes. At the same time, the prices are very high because there are so few homes being sold at the moment. So it's really a great time for both buyers and sellers.
Interesting. I didn't know about that, but that is interesting that it's good for both in a sense.
But what that does mean, though, is that there's a lot of competition out there. This is partially why everything is going so quickly, is because everybody else is doing the exact same thing you are.
Yeah, that it almost gives you kind of a panicky feeling. I mean, we're not going to be actually buying a home until spring of next year around that time, so we're not in any kind of rush, but like it's still kind of like, "Oh my God, okay, get ready for the races, guys."
Hmm. Things change. It's possible by then the interest rates might be higher or could be lower, or people could decide they want to sell their house more, or move out of the big cities because of things like COVID. You never know. So it's something that it would be a good idea for first-time home buyers to just kind of keep an eye out on the prices of homes and things like that for a little while to get a feel for the market before you just jump in and say, I want a house now.
Well, and wouldn't that be another reason for getting a realtor when you're trying to buy a home so that they can keep you updated and kind of keep tabs on things that maybe you might need help with?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The first thing that I do every morning is check how are the interest rates this morning, because that can change from day to day. And I keep in touch with several financial people, mortgage lenders, people like that, just to get a feel for where the whole market is there. You always want to go with a professional because it's just not something that you can do on your own while also doing a full-time job. And for some people working with their kids, and expect to do all of these things 100%. Something falls through the cracks, and this is, for most people, a lower priority.
Well, and if you think about it, this is the biggest purchase of your life, probably, unless, you're buying a boat or something like that. But like, this is probably the biggest purchase of your life, and the place that you're going to be living and possibly raising a family in. And I feel like that's something you want to do with a professional. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Well, are there anything that first time buyers, when they go to tour a home, that are red flags when they go into a home?
Yeah, so with that in mind here, so there's the home tours are a little different right now with COVID restrictions. So as of most recently, there's a limit on how many people can be in the home. So it's possible you may have to kind of trade
Oh,
out
okay.
people because the realtor has to go in the home legally. And if you're limited to only one or two people and you have three or four, you might have to take turns, kind of shuffle everybody through. But when you're looking at the home, one, you always want to get an inspection before you actually complete the purchase because it doesn't matter how many pairs of untrained eyes you have looking, an inspector
Oh,
knows
good
what they're
point.
looking for. Okay. But there are things that even amateur people can look for. For example, if you look and see mold places, that's never a good sign. Okay. That's a big red flag right there. Also, anything with the foundation, any cracks in it, discoloration of the cement, rust on metal parts, anything at all like that's a giant red flag. The other major one you'll see is issues with cabinets. Cabinets in particular tend to wear more than other parts of the house. So if the cabinets are kind of pulling off the wall a little bit, or if they look like they're about to fall down, that's never a good sign.
Right. Well, and I noticed we looked at a home last summer. And, I walked in, and aside from the fact that it was a little bit smaller than we wanted, I'm like, okay, this looks like a decent home. And then I saw you, and this was before he even got into real estate. He was kind of looking at some stuff. Brian was, and I'm like, what? And he noticed on the windowsill it was wood, and it was just peeling, and there was just a lot of damage to it. And I didn't even see it at first. I was too busy looking at, the size of the bedroom, the door, the bathroom, and he was noticing a lot of small details. And I think that's definitely important for anyone, is to, yeah, look at the big picture, look at the space you have, but also pay attention to the corners, the small areas that are easy to hide or you might miss at first.
Corners and edges of things are always a good place to look. because a lot of people, when they're preparing their house to sell, they'll do touch-ups and cover things up, a new coat of paint, maybe your new carpeting or things like that. Well, that'll fix the big part of it, but the edges and corners are things that are more difficult to fix, and a lot of the time it's just not worth the effort for people who are selling their home. It costs money to fix it, it costs time. It's easier to just take broad strokes to fix things than to go into detail.
That's it's definitely good to know because I mean, like we've said, it's a big purchase and taking a little extra time during your home tour to look at things and even take pictures of things that are of concern to you. I mean, this isn't the time to skimp on these type of detail looking things.
So that's really the basics of it right there. But like I said, if you talk to a realtor and they're a good realtor, they will give you pretty much the same advice along with any other advice they feel is necessary. But either way, you
Mhm.
want to talk to a realtor. That's the first step.
For me, even before Brian became a realtor, I always thought, okay, when we get a house, I want to talk to someone professional. I want to be focused on the fun of house hunting and the excitement of it, as well as obviously there's business like things to think about, but I want someone to hold my hand through it and to point out things and guide me through things that I don't know how to get through because this is my first time buying a home. And I think if you take anything from this podcast is hire a realtor. It'll be the best thing in the long run. Well, I'm sure this will not be the last time we talk about real estate and housing and whatnot. And obviously, when it comes down to when we get our house, you'll be hearing a lot about that, but that's way in the future for us. But yeah, go ahead and check us out on all our social media pages. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. And we will talk to you next week.
See you later.